Genesis, the first race prologue, before myths, before legends, before the very concept of religion. There was one race, the first to walk the void, the first to harness the power of creation itself. They were known as the Angelix in an age where the universe was barren, silent, empty, lifeless. The Angelix emerged, a race of beings so advanced that they held the power to shape worlds and breathe life into the cosmos. They were the architects of existence, the weavers of destiny, and with their divine knowledge they set forth on a grand mission to seed life across the galaxy. But even among the greatest, there is always division. What began as a unified vision soon fractured into chaos. Among them rose the fallen, those who defied the order, who sought not just to create life, but to rule it. They rejected balance, embraced ambition, and demanded dominion over the worlds they had sown. And so, from the heart of their own kind, a war was born. The war that would echo through eternity. A battle not of mortals, but of gods, of Angelix and fallen. The struggle that would ignite the eternal conflict of heaven and hell. This is how it began. Chapter 1. The dawn of creation. The void stretched endlessly before them, an ocean of nothingness. Darkness ruled in the absence of time, for time had yet to be written. But within this abyss a pulse stirred, a flicker of radiance in an otherwise infinite shadow. The Angelix had arrived. From the stillness their forms emerged, shimmering beings of celestial light, woven from the very essence of the cosmos. Their eyes burned like newborn stars. Their wings, vast and resplendent, stretched across the heavens, leaving trails of golden luminescence in their wake. They were neither flesh nor spirit, but something beyond the comprehension of lesser existences. They were the first, the progenitors, the architects of all things yet to come. In the heart of the void, the council of the Prime convened. The Prime was the center of their wisdom, the entity of pure will, neither male nor female, but both, a singularity of enlightenment. Around the Prime, the great Angelix gathered, those who had been chosen to sculpt the very foundation of reality. Among them stood Ilarion, the wise, Seraphis the unyielding, Eoriel, the keeper of truth, and Azaziel, the visionary. Each bore a radiance of their own, a manifestation of their essence and purpose. The Prime spoke, their voice neither a sound nor a whisper, but a command etched into the very fabric of existence itself. The void has slept long enough. It is time for the birth of the cosmos. With a unified will, the Angelix extended their hands, and from their fingertips burst rivers of creation, cascading outward in great spirals of energy. Galaxies ignited like sparks from a divine forge. Suns blossomed into brilliance, and worlds were molded from the dust of infinity. Space trembled as the silent vacuum was filled with light, with motion, with the first breath of existence. The first age of the cosmos had begun. The seeds of dissentions passed in the blink of an eternal The Angelix watched as the worlds they had crafted grew, as life took root upon distant planets. They nurtured the burgeoning civilizations, guiding them like patient parents, whispering wisdom into the hearts of their creations. They watched as sentient beings evolved, reaching toward the stars, seeking meaning, seeking purpose. But among the Angelix, there were those who began to question. Not all were content with merely creating. Azaziel, once a devoted architect of existence, found himself consumed by a longing deeper than any his kind had ever known. He marveled at the beauty of the cosmos, but he also saw its frailty. These creatures they had shaped, these mortal beings were weak, prone to folly, to destruction. Was it not their duty to rule? To shepherd them, not as guides, but as lords? He brought his concerns to the council, standing before the Prime with eyes like burning embers. "We have given them life, but they are lost," Azaziel declared. "We grant them wisdom, yet they choose ignorance. We offer them balance, yet they embrace chaos. How long must we watch them stumble in darkness? Let us take our rightful place. Let us shape their destiny with a firm hand." A silence fell over the gathered Angelix, a silence heavier than the weight of galaxies. Seraphis the unyielding stepped forward, her presence like a blade honed over countless millennia. We are not rulers, Azaziel. We are not gods. We were meant to bring life, not control it. Are we not more than mere caretakers? Azaziel pressed. We are divine. We are the first. If we do not govern the course of our creations, then who will? Ilarion, the wise, met Azaziel's gaze with sorrow. The path you seek leads only to tyranny. That is not our purpose. Azaziel clenched his fists, his light flickering like a dying sun. He looked to the others, to those who felt the same pull in their hearts, the silent ones who, like him, yearned for dominion rather than mere guidance. They did not speak, but he felt their agreement in the stillness. A rift had formed. The first. War it began with whispers in the great halls of the Angelix. It ended with fire in the heavens. Azaziel and his followers, the first to break from the unity of creation, gathered in the far reaches of existence. They called themselves the Fallen, not in shame but in defiance. No longer would they kneel before the laws of the Prime. No longer would they watch idly as lesser beings fumbled through the gift of life. The war that erupted shook the very foundations of the cosmos. Light clashed against light, celestial beings, torn asunder in a battle of ideologies. The Angelix who stood with the Prime fought to preserve balance, to maintain the sanctity of free will. The Fallen, under Azaziel's command, sought to claim dominion over the universe, to impose order through rule. The conflict raged across the stars, entire galaxies obliterated, as the battle escalated beyond comprehension. Black holes were forged in the aftermath of their war cries, supernovas born from the clash of their blades. Reality itself trembled as gods waged war. In the end, the Prime decreed the fate of the Fallen. Azaziel and his legions were cast down, exiled to the void beyond creation, a prison of their own making. They became the Forsaken, the Cursed, the shadows that lurked in the corners of existence. No longer Angelix, they became something else, something dark, something feared. They became the origin of all myths, all legends of demons and lords of the abyss. And so the eternal struggle began. The war between light and darkness, between freedom and dominion, between the Angelix and the Fallen. A war that would echo through eternity, shaping the fate of all who would come after. This was the beginning, the genesis of the first race. Chapter 2. The Fallen's Exile. The echoes of war still rippled across the fabric of existence. The void, once pristine and untouched, now bore the scars of celestial conflict. Scattered remnants of shattered stars floated aimlessly, silent testaments, to a war that had shaken creation itself. The birth of the cosmos had been marred by bloodshed, and the first of the divine races had tasted the bitterness of their own ambition. Azaziel stood on the precipice of nothingness, his once vibrant wings now dark and tattered, stained with the ash of the cosmic fires that had consumed his kind. He gazed out into the vast emptiness, his heart pulsing with a mixture of rage and sorrow. The prison they had been cast into was no ordinary exile. This was not a realm of peace or silence. It was a place of torment, a land where time twisted on itself, where light could not exist, and the very essence of creation was slowly consumed. The Fallen, those who had followed Azaziel into defiance, stood with him in silence. Their bodies were once radiant, their forms the pinnacle of celestial beauty. But now, like their leader, they too had been tainted by their rebellion. The light of their being had dimmed, leaving only shadows of their former selves. Their faces were etched with sorrow, but beneath that sorrow there was something else, something dark, something dangerous. They were no longer the architects of creation. They had become the architects of something else. Azaziel turned his gaze to his followers. He saw the same fire that burned within him, the same defiance that had led them into this exile. Despite the suffering, despite the prison they now inhabited, they were still powerful, still the first beings to walk the void, and that, he knew, was something the Prime could never take from them. "We have been cast aside." Azaziel's voice rang, out sharp and commanding, breaking the heavy silence. "We have been exiled into this forsaken place, but it will not be our end. They think they have broken us, but we are not so easily defeated." The fallen murmured among themselves, their faces grim but their resolve hardening with each passing moment. They had been betrayed, cast down from the heights of their divinity, and now they found themselves trapped in a prison where the very essence of creation had turned against them. The air was thick with despair, and yet there was something stirring in the hearts of the fallen. A whisper, a promise that refused to die. Azaziel raised his hand, his darkened wings unfolding as he faced his followers. "We were not meant to kneel. We were not meant to be servants to the mortals we created. We were the first beings of the universe, and it is time that the universe remembers that. We will rise again." His words were like sparks in a dry forest, igniting a flame of hope among the fallen. The prison they had been cast into was not their end. It was merely the beginning. They would wait, they would endure, and they would grow stronger. The power of creation still flowed through their veins, though tainted and corrupted, and it would not be denied. One of Azaziel's closest followers, a fallen angel named Tyrael, stepped forward, his once brilliant armor now dulled and cracked. "Azaziel, the Prime may have cast us out, but we are still Angelix. Our power may be diminished, but we are not weak. There is still hope." Azaziel's gaze softened for a moment, and then he spoke with the weight of eons behind his words. "The Prime thought they could silence us. They thought they could erase us. But they do not understand the power of the fallen. We will not be forgotten, and we will not be left to rot in this void." As Azaziel spoke, the void around them seemed to shift, the very fabric of existence bending under his will. It was not the same as the mighty force that had shaped the cosmos in the beginning, but it was something powerful, something that pulsed with the remnants of divine energy. The fallen could feel it. Their essence was still tied to the universe, still connected to the very forces that had shaped creation. The prison may have drained them, but it had not severed their ties to the cosmos. Tyrael looked at Azaziel with renewed hope. "What should we do?" "We will rebuild," Azaziel replied, his eyes gleaming with a cold fire. "But we will not be like the Angelix. We will not be mere creators. We will be rulers. The universe will bend to our will. And when it does, we will return to the Angelix, not as equals, but as masters. We will make them see that we are the true architects of existence." The other fallen nodded, their spirits lifting with Azaziel's words. They were no longer mere exiles. They were conquerors in waiting. The promise of power was too great to ignore, and the corruption that had seeped into their beings only fueled their desire for dominion. The universe, they now understood, was not meant to be free. It was meant to be ruled. And so, in the heart of their prison, the fallen began to plot their rise. They studied the remnants of creation, the fractured fragments of the universe that they had once crafted. They sought knowledge in the darkness, digging deep into the forgotten corners of the void, finding fragments of power that had been discarded long ago. They would harness this power and use it to break free from their prison, to rise again, and take their place as rulers of the cosmos. As the fallen labored in the darkness, something ancient stirred in the depths of the void, a force that had lain dormant since the birth of the cosmos, waiting for the right moment to awaken. It was a darkness older than the Angelix, older than the stars themselves. And it was calling out to Azaziel. One night, as Azaziel stood alone in the heart of the prison, he felt it, a whisper, a presence, a power that seemed to fill the void. It was dark, and yet it was familiar. It was a part of him, a part of them, all. The darkness was not something to fear, it was something to embrace. And as Azaziel reached out to it, he understood. This was the true power, the power that would fuel their return. Azaziel knelt in the darkness, feeling the power surge. Through him, "We will rise," he whispered, And when we do, the universe will tremble. Chapter 3. The seeds of Dominionions passed, and time itself became a vague, forgotten concept in the void. The fallen, led by Azaziel, had transformed. No longer the celestial beings they once were, their once luminous forms had darkened, their wings now like shattered fragments of stars, their eyes burning with an infernal fire. The very prison that had been designed to break them had only fueled their strength. They had become something more than they had been, more than the Angelix ever could have imagined. Azaziel stood at the center of their realm, the place they had come to call their own. It was a world of endless shadow, where no light could exist. Here they had begun to forge something new, something born of rebellion, something beyond the very nature of creation itself. It was in this endless darkness that they found their purpose. The power of the void called to them, beckoning them toward their ultimate goal, dominion over all existence. Around Azaziel, his followers worked tirelessly, their minds focused on a singular mission: to rebuild the power they had lost, to regain the strength they once held as creators. It was not enough to simply escape their prison. They sought to forge a new reality, one in which they would be the rulers, not the creators. They would shape the universe to their will, bending the very fabric of existence to suit their dark desires. Tyrael, who had once stood by Azaziel's side as a trusted confidant, now approached him, his once glorious armor now adorned with dark sigils and corrupted runes. His eyes, like the others, burned with an intensity that came not from the light, but from the darkness they had embraced. "We are ready," Tyrael said, his voice heavy with the weight of their years in exile. "We have harnessed enough power from the void. We can begin the process now." Azaziel turned to him, his gaze cold but filled with an unshakable determination. "Yes, it is time," he said, "but we must be patient. The universe will not fall under our rule in an instant. We will need more power, more followers. We will need to prepare for our return." Tyrael nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had come far, but there was still much to be done. The fallen had no intention of simply breaking free from their prison and wreaking havoc on the universe. No, their goal was far more calculated. They would return not as mere rebels, but as conquerors, with an army at their back and a plan that would ensure their reign was unchallenged. And so, the fallen began to shape their new realm. It was a place of creation, but twisted, a reflection of the very worlds they had once crafted, but corrupted and darkened by their influence. They wove twisted landscapes from the very fabric of their own suffering. They forged mountains of obsidian, rivers of molten fire, and skies that rained ash and blood. This world, born of their ambition, would become the birthplace of their new empire. While the fallen labored, Azaziel's mind wandered back to the moment of their exile, to the day they had been cast out by the Prime. The betrayal, the fury, the sense of injustice, it had all fueled them. But now, in the silence of their dark sanctuary, Azaziel began to realize something deeper. Their war with the Angelix had not been just about power. It had been about control over the very essence of existence itself. The Prime had sought to impose order upon the universe, to create a balance between light and dark, creation and destruction. But Azaziel and his followers had come to understand that balance was an illusion. True power did not lie in balance. It lay in domination, in subjugation, in bending the universe to one's will. That was the lesson they had learned in their exile. The Angelix had feared them not because of their strength, but because of their vision, because they sought to take control, to reshape reality itself. Azaziel turned to his followers once more. "We must find a way to break the balance. We must find a way to make the universe ours." His words were met with a murmur of agreement, a growing sense of purpose. The fallen had found their cause. They would not merely return to the cosmos, as they once were. They would reshape it, redefine it, and rule it. As Azaziel's plans took form, the fallen began to reach out into the void, tapping into the remnants of their old power. They had discovered a secret in the darkness, a hidden source of power, an ancient energy that predated even the Angelix themselves. This energy, raw and untamed, could be harnessed to fuel their conquest. It was a power beyond the reach of the Prime, a force that could twist the very fabric of reality. They called it the Void-born power. With each passing day, the Fallen grew stronger, their abilities more potent, their connection to the Void deeper. They forged weapons imbued with this new energy, blades that could cut through the very essence of existence, shields that could block the mightiest of cosmic forces. But they did not stop there. They began to experiment with creating life, dark, twisted mockeries of the beings they had once nurtured. These creatures, born of the Void, were bound to the Fallen's will. They were the first of a new army, one that would one day march across the galaxies and bring the universe to its knees. Azaziel knew that it would take time, but he was patient. In the Void, there was no rush. Time had no meaning in their prison, and they had all the time in the world to prepare. The Fallen were not just building an army, they were building a legacy. One by one, more and more of the Fallen embraced the darkness, their wings now fully corrupted, their hearts hardened by the years of exile. They were no longer the creators of life, but the masters of death, the lords of the Void. They had tasted the power of domination, and now, nothing would stand in their way. The first whispers of their return began to spread through the universe, reaching the farthest corners of existence. On the worlds the Angelix had seeded, strange occurrences began to take place. Shadows seemed to linger longer, the skies darkened unnaturally, and strange creatures were born, twisted by the Void-born, energy that flowed through the Fallen's creations. The stage was set for their return. The Fallen would rise, and the universe would tremble. Azaziel stood at the heart of their dark empire, his wings unfurled in full, his eyes glowing with the power of the Void. "We will return," he said, his voice echoing through the darkened landscape. "And when we do, nothing will stop us." Chapter 4. The Whisper of Legends. The universe, vast and indifferent, continued its eternal dance of creation and destruction. Stars were born and died in cycles that no being could truly comprehend. Galaxies spun, nebulae bloomed like cosmic flowers, and new worlds arose from the dust of the old. But something had begun to stir in the deep recesses of reality, an ancient and forgotten force that had lain dormant since the beginning of time. It was the whisper of a legend, long buried by the passing of eons, and it carried with it the scent of power, the power of the Fallen. On the surface of a forgotten world, a small, seemingly insignificant planet on the edge of a distant galaxy, the seeds of this power began to take root. It was a world once touched by the hands of the Angelix, now abandoned to its own devices, left to evolve in the wake of their departure. The creatures that had once been guided and nurtured by the divine architects now lived in a state of primitive harmony. They were unaware of the cosmic war that had shaped their existence, unaware that they were the descendants of a race once touched by godly hands. But deep beneath the surface of this world, something stirred. Azaziel had sensed it. A whisper, in the fabric of the Void that beckoned him, calling him to this world. It was not the usual hum of creation, but something darker, something older. The Void-born power that he and the Fallen had harnessed was alive in the galaxy, bleeding out into the very fabric of reality itself. It was here that they would first begin their return, not in force, but in influence. At the heart of this world stood a ruined temple, ancient and weathered by time. The civilization that had once worshipped there had long since fallen into myth. The temple, like the world itself, had been abandoned, left to the ravages of time and nature. But the Fallen knew the truth. The temple was no relic of the past, it was a key. It was the link between their prison in the Void and the physical realms they sought to dominate. Azaziel stood before the temple now, his blackened wings folded against his back, his once glorious armor now corroded with the marks of the Void. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light as he looked upon the ancient structure. In the temple's ruins he saw not decay, but opportunity. They will not know what is coming, Azaziel murmured to himself, his voice carrying an edge of dark satisfaction. Around him the fallen gathered, those who had been by his side, since the beginning of their exile. Their forms had become even more twisted in the years since their banishment, their very existence bound to the dark energies they had embraced. Some had grown monstrous, their bodies now unrecognizable as the celestial beings they once were. But their power was undeniable. The void had shaped them into something more than they had ever been, creatures of shadow and flame, beings forged from the deepest corners of existence. They moved with purpose, their steps echoing on the cracked stone floor of the temple. The very air around them seemed to tremble as they channeled their energy. Azaziel raised a hand, and the temple doors groaned as they creaked open, revealing the depths within. The temple's interior was cloaked in darkness, but Azaziel's eyes burned through the gloom. It was here, deep within the temple's sacred halls, that the key to their future lay. A dormant power, an ancient force that predated even the Angelix, slumbered beneath the surface, waiting for the right hands to awaken it. Azaziel reached forward and placed his hand upon the stone altar at the center of the temple. The instant his fingers brushed the surface, the ground trembled beneath him. A low hum reverberated through the stone, as if the very temple was alive, responding to his touch. The air became thick with energy, charged with an ancient force that no mortal or god had touched for eons. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows, a being cloaked in tattered robes, their face obscured by the hood. The fallen knew who it was, but their presence was unexpected. This figure was not one of their own. "You dare disturb the resting place of the old ones?" the figure asked, their voice raspy and low, but filled with authority. "This power is not for you, Azaziel." Azaziel's eyes narrowed as he turned to face the intruder. "I do not seek your approval, old one," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "I seek what is mine by right, what has always been mine. You are nothing but a remnant of a forgotten age." The figure chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down the spine of every fallen present. "You think you can control that which even the first ones feared? That which the Angelix sealed away for a reason?" Azaziel stepped closer, his wings unfurling to their full span. "I am no longer the Angelix I once was. I am Azaziel, the fallen, and I will do what the Prime could never do. I will awaken the old ones." The figure's eyes glinted beneath the hood, and for a moment the room grew colder, darker. "You are not ready," the figure warned. "The power you seek will consume you. It is not a tool for conquest. It is a force of annihilation. The old ones did not just vanish, Azaziel. They were bound here for a reason." But Azaziel's resolve had already hardened. The whispers of the void called to him, urging him to awaken the ancient power beneath the temple. This was the key to breaking the chains that bound him and his followers. This was the force that would make them rulers of the cosmos. With a snap of his fingers, the fallen moved in unison, their hands raised to the altar. The ground shook with a mighty roar as the ancient power began to awaken. The temple walls cracked, and the air filled with the sound of distant, forgotten voices. The old ones were stirring. The power was rising. And then there was silence. Azaziel stood before the altar, his breath steady as he gazed into the abyss that now filled the temple. The darkness was alive, writhing like a serpent. A presence, a consciousness touched his mind, and Azaziel smiled. This was the beginning. "I will not be denied," Azaziel whispered into the void. "And neither will my followers." As the power surged through him, he felt the old figure retreat into the shadows, knowing that the fallen had made their first move. The seeds of dominion had been planted, and soon the universe would feel the tremors of their return. Chapter 5. The shadows of dominion. The awakening of the old ones had not gone unnoticed. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread, creeping like shadows in the corners of the universe. Beings of power, ancient and mortal alike, felt a sudden tremor, a shift in the cosmic balance that reverberated through every star system, every celestial body. It was not the usual hum of creation or destruction, but a dissonant note, a crack in the fabric of reality itself. The universe had always known balance, but now there was something else, a disturbance, a force that sought to fracture it all. On a distant world, a small green planet teeming with life, a great council met in secret. The leaders of various races, each holding a place in the grand tapestry of existence, gathered in a chamber bathed in the light of 1,000 stars. These were not mere mortals, but beings of great wisdom and ancient power. They had existed long before the Angelix had walked the universe, and they had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "I do not like this," said the eldest among them, an ancient being whose skin shimmered with the light of distant galaxies. His voice was gravelly, like the grinding of stone, but it carried the weight of aeons. "The balance is being disturbed. I can feel it. Something dark is stirring." Another figure, a being made of swirling molten energy, nodded gravely. "The signs are clear. The old temple, the one where the Angelix once bound the powers of the old ones, has been disturbed. That is no coincidence." The first being, known as Orthelios, stood up and began pacing, his robes flowing behind him like the nebulae in the deepest space. "You all know the stories, the legends of the fallen. But I thought they were myths, faded into the forgotten corners of history. It cannot be them. They were defeated, cast into the void. It is them." A third figure spoke softly, their voice carrying a cool, unyielding certainty. "Azaziel, the one who led them. I have seen his mark upon the temple. He has awoken what was meant to remain sealed away. They seek not to return. They seek to remake the universe in their image." Orthelios stopped pacing and turned to face the council. "If they truly have returned, then the fabric of existence itself is in jeopardy. Their ambition, their lust for power will be our undoing. But we are not without allies. There are still those who walk the stars, beings of light and of darkness, of fire and of shadow, who will stand against them." A figure draped in silver and gold stepped forward. "We have stood in balance for eons. The Angelix, the Prime, the First Ones. All of us have held sway over the universe in one way or another. But if the fallen have truly returned, we will need to act swiftly. We cannot afford to wait." Orthelios nodded. "Then we must unite the forces of the cosmos, for this is a battle unlike any we have fought before. The fallen are not mere invaders. They are the embodiment of a force that seeks to unravel the very foundation of creation itself." Meanwhile, in the shadowed realm of the fallen, Azaziel stood at the pinnacle of the temple, the power of the old ones now coursing through him and his followers. The ritual had been successful, but the cost had been greater than they had anticipated. The very air around them seemed to hum with dark energy, and the temple's once sturdy foundations now trembled, as if they too were awakening to a new, dangerous reality. Azaziel's eyes gleamed with newfound power as he turned to his followers. "The old ones are ours. We are the architects of a new universe, one where nothing and no one will stand in our way. The balance of creation is shattered. The Prime thought they could contain us, but they have only strengthened our resolve. We will be the new rulers of existence." Tyrael, standing at Azaziel's side, looked toward the altar where the power of the old ones was still slowly swirling in the air, a pulsating mass of dark energy. "What is next, Azaziel? How do we shape the universe to our will?" Azaziel's gaze darkened. "We will begin by uniting the forces of chaos and destruction. We will bend the universe to our will. The first step is to reach out to those who will join us, the ones who seek power, who feel the tremors of our return and yearn for what we can offer." He raised his hand to the sky, feeling the tendrils of the old one's power reach into the very fabric of reality. "The universe is vast, but it is fragile. There are cracks, weaknesses, and they can be exploited. We will find those cracks, and When we do, we will seize them. Days passed, and the fallen began to move across the universe. They did not come in force. Not yet. Their presence was subtle at first, whispers and dark shadows creeping into the lives of those who dwelled on distant planets. The fallen began to make contact with the outcasts, the exiles, the power-hungry warlords, and the corrupted empires that had long forgotten the laws of creation. These were the beings who would serve them, the ones who would form the foundation of their new empire. The first to respond was a powerful warlord from the distant planet of Viridia, a world on the outskirts of the galaxy. He had heard the whispers of the fallen, and he knew that their return would mean the end of the old order. But he saw in it an opportunity to rise to power, to conquer worlds, to claim dominion over the stars. Warlord Althar, a hulking figure whose body was covered in ancient battle scars, stood before the fallen emissary, a dark smile curling upon his lips. "You offer power," he said, his voice booming like a thunderclap, "and I take it. Tell me, fallen, what do you ask of me?" Azaziel's voice was smooth, his words calculated. "We do not ask for your loyalty, Warlord Althar. We offer you a place in the new world we are building. Together we will crush the Prime, destroy the Angelix, and remake existence in our image." Althar's laughter rumbled through the room, and he placed a massive hand upon his chest. "Then consider it done." Across the stars, other beings, some powerful, others cunning, began to hear the call of the fallen. Slowly a coalition began to form, one that sought to overthrow the old cosmic order and bring about a new era of darkness and dominion. But the power of the Prime, though fractured, was still a force to be reckoned with, and the whisper of the fallen's return would not go unanswered. Orthelios and the Council of the Ancient Races had already begun to move, seeking alliances of their own. The stage was set, and the universe braced itself for the coming conflict, a battle that would decide the fate of all existence. The fallen would rise, and the war for the cosmos was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. The universe trembled. It was subtle at first, small disturbances, ripples in the fabric of reality that no one noticed, but those with eyes attuned to the currents of creation. But as the fallen began to move through the galaxy, their reach spread like ink in water, staining everything it touched with darkness. Their whispers echoed in the ears of the power-hungry, the desperate, and the broken. Slowly but surely, those who craved dominion began to answer the call. Azaziel stood on the edge of the ancient precipice, gazing into the swirling cosmos. He could feel the power of the old ones, now pulsing through him like an eternal heartbeat. His wings stretched wide, absorbing the energy of the dark sky. The void was alive with whispers of what was to come. He could sense the growing unease of the universe, the shift in power that had begun. The fallen were no longer mere outcasts. They were conquerors, and their influence was spreading like wildfire. "Azaziel!" Tyrael's voice broke through the silence, pulling Azaziel's attention away from the vastness before him. The fallen's most trusted lieutenant stepped forward, his dark armor gleaming with the fire of the void. "We have received word from the first of our new allies. Warlord Althar has begun his campaign. He is already conquering worlds on the fringes of the galaxy, wiping out entire civilizations to further his power." Azaziel turned slowly to face Tyrael, his expression unreadable. "Good. The first of many. But this is just the beginning. Althar's strength is nothing compared to the forces we will command." Tyrael nodded, but his face held a shadow of concern. "What of the Council? They are already beginning to unite against us. The ancient races, Orthelios and the others, they will not simply stand by and let us destroy the balance of the universe." Azaziel's lips curled into a smile. "Let them unite. They have no true understanding of what we have become. The universe will be ours whether they fight or not. The fallen will not be denied." On the far side of the galaxy, Orthelios stood at the head of the council, the weight of countless ages pressing down upon his shoulders. The leaders of the ancient races had gathered in secret, their faces grim as they discussed the growing threat of the fallen. In the halls of their hidden citadel, the air was thick with tension, and the stars outside seemed to pulse with foreboding energy. "We must act," Orthelios said, his voice low and commanding. "Azaziel's return cannot be ignored. The fallen are no longer scattered remnants. They have forged an army, and their influence is spreading rapidly. We must prepare for war." The council murmured in agreement, but there was unease in the Tau air. These were ancient beings not prone to impulsive decisions, but the threat the fallen posed was unlike any they had ever faced. The balance of the cosmos was in danger of being shattered, and if the fallen succeeded, they would reshape existence in their own image, a dark, twisted reflection of what it had once been. "I have sent word to the Prime," a figure draped in shimmering robes of silver and gold spoke up. "They will respond. We may not have much time, but we will have their aid. Together, we will form a resistance strong enough to face the fallen." Another voice, this one cold and sharp, cut through the discussion. "The Prime may be powerful, but they are not invincible. Their reach is not what it once was. Their interest in maintaining the balance has waned. They will not intervene unless it serves their own purposes." Orthelios turned his gaze to the speaker, a being of pure energy, whose form constantly shifted, like a nebula. "Then we will not rely solely on the Prime. We will unite the forces of light and shadow, creation and destruction. We will seek out allies among the stars, those who still remember the old ways, those who know the price of power." The council's leaders exchanged uneasy glances. Orthelios was right. The universe had always been defined by its balance. But now that balance was in jeopardy, the time for neutrality had passed. Meanwhile, on the distant world of Viridia, Warlord Althar's campaign was in full swing. The mighty warlord, an imposing figure clad in black armor adorned with the symbols of the fallen, stood atop a conquered fortress, surveying the ruined city below. The once thriving world had been reduced to ashes, its population either enslaved or wiped out. Althar's armies, formed from the outcasts and mercenaries who had flocked to the fallen's cause, were growing ever stronger. Althar's forces had already taken control of 3 planets in the fringe systems, and his name was beginning to echo across the stars. The might of his war machines, fueled by the dark energy of the Voidborn, was unstoppable. He had begun to carve out his own kingdom, a brutal empire built on fear and blood. Althar's lieutenant, a twisted being known as Zira, approached him, her eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. "The fallen grow stronger with each passing day. Soon our enemies will realize that resistance is futile. We will bring the Prime to their knees." Althar grinned, his teeth sharp like those of a predator. "Yes, they will fall just as all who oppose us will. The Prime, the Angelix, they all think themselves beyond the reach of death. But Azaziel has taught me otherwise. There is no force that can stop us now." Zira's eyes narrowed. "What of the other warlords? Will they bow to Azaziel's vision? Or will they challenge us for dominance?" "Let them come," Althar growled, his voice thick with ambition. "The more who join us, the stronger we become. But any who resist, it will be crushed." As the fallen's power spread, so too did the resistance. The ancient races, the Prime, and even those who had once sworn allegiance to the Angelix began to move in the shadows. They could feel the storm approaching, and they knew that the time for waiting was over. The universe had grown accustomed to its stability, to the balance between creation and destruction. But the fallen would not rest until they had overturned everything, until they had reshaped the very essence of existence itself. In the halls of the hidden citadel, Orthelios stared into the void, a deep frown etched upon his face. "We must be ready," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "The time of the fallen is now, but it will not be forever. We will fight. The battle for the cosmos begins." Chapter 7. The first battle. The stars burned cold in the night sky, distant fires marking the passage of time. But the cosmos was no longer the serene, unchanging expanse it once was. Something had broken, something ancient and primal, and now, the universe felt like a pressure cooker, each moment building toward the inevitable eruption of war. Azaziel stood at the helm of his flagship, the Oblivion's Edge, a massive craft forged in the heart of the void. It was a ship born of darkness, its blackened hull glowing with veins of molten energy, like the very arteries of the abyss. The fallen had come a long way from being mere outcasts drifting in exile. Now they commanded armies and fleets that stretched across the stars. The first steps of their cosmic conquest had been successful, their influence already turning entire systems into pawns on a galactic chessboard. Azaziel's eyes glowing with the power of the Old Ones, scanned the expanse of space before him. The warlord Althar's forces had been deployed, and already their conquest had begun to fracture the outer rim of the galaxy. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The time had come to strike deeper, to unleash the might of the fallen on a grander scale. "The first battle will be upon us soon," Azaziel said, his voice smooth like dark velvet. "It is time to make them understand the price of defying us." Tyrael, ever at Azaziel's side, nodded. His form, twisted and warped by the void's power, shimmered in the dim light of the command room. "The Prime will resist us, Orthelios, and the others know what is at stake. They will send their forces." Azaziel's lips curled into a smile. "Let them come. The more they gather, the stronger we will become. Their unity will shatter like glass in the wake of our might." At his command, the fleet of the fallen began to mobilize. Ships, vast, incomprehensible and black as the void itself, began to take formation, their engines thrumming with dark energy as they prepared for their first direct assault on one of the most important systems in the galaxy. Tarathis, the heart of the ancient council of the Prime. Tarathis was a world teeming with life, its cities, and forests a balance of nature and civilization. It had stood as a symbol of harmony for eons, a bastion of the ancient races. But now, it would become the stage for the opening act of a cosmic war. On Tarathis, Orthelios watched as his council prepared for what they knew would be their greatest test. It was not a world of great military might or war-hardened armies, but it was a world that held a deep connection to the ancient powers of creation. The beings of Tarathis were diplomats, historians, and scholars, keepers of knowledge, but their knowledge could only go so far. When the fallen attacked, Tarathis would not be able to defend itself alone. "We must hold them off," Orthelios said, his voice steady but filled with a growing resolve. "If the fallen breach Tarathis, it will be the beginning of the end. We cannot allow them to take this world." A being of pure starlight, Seraphon, a member of the council and one of the oldest beings alive, stepped forward. His luminous form radiated warmth and power, but his expression was grave. "Orthelios, we are few. The fallen have power unlike anything we've faced. We must gather more allies if we are to stand a chance." "We have already reached out," Orthelios replied. "But even if we unite the forces of the universe, it may not be enough. The fallen are far more than just an army. They are a force of nature, born from the very depths of the cosmos." "But we must try," Seraphon insisted. "We cannot give up without a fight. The universe needs to see that we still stand." Across the stars, the ripples of the approaching conflict were being felt in unexpected corners of the galaxy. In the dark, forgotten corners of space, the outcasts, the mercenaries, and the dispossessed had begun to rally to the call of the fallen. Those who had always lurked in the shadows now saw an opportunity to rise. A single small ship, piloted by a rogue captain named Lyrael, an expert in tactics and warfare, cut through the blackness, heading toward the crumbling remnants of an ancient station on the fringes of the galaxy. This station had been abandoned for centuries, but now it held something invaluable, a strategic position in the war. As Lyrael's ship docked, she looked out the viewport to see the vast reaches of space stretching beyond. The call to arms had been strong, and now she was part of a growing movement, an army of those who had nothing left to lose. "Well, Captain," one of her officers said as they entered the dimly lit war room. The fallen have called. And now, Arch, you know the stakes. Do we stand by the Prime, or do we embrace the new world the fallen promise? Lyriel smiled, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the coming war. The Prime have failed us, she said, her voice laced with cold determination. It's time to carve our own destiny. Back on Tarathis, as the first ships of the Fallen's fleet entered orbit, the ground shook with the weight of impending doom. The skies themselves seemed to darken, the once clear atmosphere now filled with the ominous glow of energy weapons from the invaders' ships. Orthelios stood with his council, watching as the great fleet descended. He could feel the tension in the air, the swirling currents of power and fate. The time had come. The first volley of energy weapons hit Tarathis's atmosphere, tearing through the air like thunder. The sky erupted in fire as the surface of the planet trembled under the weight of the assault. They are here, Orthelios said, his voice cold. The battle for the galaxy begins now. The battle over Tarathis was like nothing the universe had ever witnessed. The armies of the Prime, though smaller and less prepared, fought with the ferocity of those who had long protected the balance of creation. They called upon the ancient powers, weaving spells of light and energy to shield their world from the Fallen's devastating weapons. But the Fallen were relentless. They did not fight with mere brute force. They fought with precision, with cold, calculated strategy. Their ships rained fire upon the defenders, their ground forces sweeping through cities with terrifying efficiency. Azaziel had given them the edge. Each warrior was more than a soldier. They were beings infused with the power of the Old Ones, capable of reshaping reality itself. Azaziel watched from his flagship, a satisfied smile on his face as he saw the destruction unfold below. His fleet was vast, and the Prime's resistance was crumbling before them. But as the battle raged on, Orthelios stood on the battlefield, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him. He knew this fight would not be won with force, alone. There was something deeper at play, a cosmic force that even the Fallen had underestimated. We will not give up, Orthelios whispered, the ancient power of creation coursing through him. The universe will not fall to darkness. Chapter 8. The turning tide. The battle over Tarathis had become a maelstrom of light and shadow, destruction and defiance. The world's once peaceful skies had been marred by fire, its surface scarred by the brutal clash of armies. The air was thick with the smoke of burning cities, the cries of the Fallen echoing in the distance. The Prime's forces, though fewer in number, fought with a desperate tenacity, unwilling to let the Fallen consume their homeworld without a struggle. But the Fallen had come prepared. They were not merely an army, they were a force of nature, a cosmic reckoning that could bend reality to their will. On the surface of Tarathis, Orthelios led his forces with unwavering resolve. He had watched as the sky above was torn open by the energy blasts of the Fallen's ships, as cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to rubble. Yet still, he fought. His power, derived from the ancient knowledge of the stars themselves, flared brightly as he rallied the defenders. "Hold the line!" he shouted to his forces, his voice carrying the weight of the ages. "We will not let them have this world." But the Fallen were relentless. Above Tarathis, Azaziel's flagship, Oblivion's Edge, hovered like a shadow, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. From its command deck, Azaziel watched the battle unfold with quiet satisfaction. His forces were pressing forward, their precision strikes tearing apart the Prime's defenses. The Old One's power surged through him, and with it the knowledge of how to shatter the very foundations of existence. Tyrael stood beside him, his dark form as ever a reminder of the depths to which they had fallen. The Prime fight bravely. Azaziel. But they are not enough. Azaziel nodded, his eyes gleaming with cold determination. They never were. But their bravery will be their undoing. The longer they resist, the more energy they expend. Soon they will have nothing left to give. Back on the planet's surface, Orthelios could feel the growing strain. His forces were being pushed back, their strength waning as the Fallen's relentless assault continued. Yet there was a fire in him, a spark of something deeper, something that could not be extinguished by mere darkness. "We must retreat," Seraphon, the being of starlight, said urgently. His form shimmered like the dawn, and his voice carried the weight of wisdom earned through countless ages. "We cannot hold them much longer. If we stay, Terathis will fall." Orthelios' gaze hardened, but he did not immediately respond. He was torn between his duty to his people and the knowledge that the Fallen were too powerful to be stopped here, at this moment. Terathis, a world that had been a symbol of balance for so long, was on the brink of annihilation. But even so, to retreat felt like conceding defeat. "No," Orthelios said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We cannot abandon this world. If we fall here, if we give up the heart of the Prime, then all is lost. But if we stay," Seraphon insisted, "we lose everything. There is no victory in death." A long silence followed as Orthelios watched the battle unfold. His eyes narrowed as he considered his options. The Prime's forces could not win this fight, not in their current state. But there was one last hope, one last gambit. "Prepare the Starforges," Orthelios said quietly, his voice filled with ancient purpose. Seraphon's eyes widened in understanding. "Are you certain? The Starforges have been dormant for millennia. We have no choice," Orthelios said, his tone unyielding. "We must awaken them. It is the only hope we have." The Starforges were a relic of an age long past, ancient engines of creation and destruction that could bend the very fabric of the cosmos. They were weapons capable of creating stars, or destroying them, shaping worlds as easily as a craftsman shapes clay. Long ago they had been used to forge the universe itself, but their power had been locked away by the ancient races, fearful of their potential to disrupt the delicate balance of existence. But in this moment of desperation, Orthelios saw no other option. If the Prime were to survive, they would need to tap into that long-forgotten power. The Starforges could turn the tide, if only they could be activated in time. Above the battlefield, as the Fallen's forces closed in, Azaziel's cold eyes scanned the planet's surface. He could sense the disturbance, an ancient power awakening. He knew what it was. The Starforges. "The Prime are trying to play their last card," Tyrael observed. "They think they can stop us with forgotten relics, but it is too late." Azaziel's lips curled into a smirk. "Let them try. The Starforges were sealed for a reason. The power they contain is not meant to be wielded. It is chaos incarnate." Tyrael stepped closer, his form shifting like smoke in the air. "What if the Starforges do succeed? What if they are able to turn the tide?" "They won't," Azaziel said coldly. "We will make sure of it. This war will end with the Prime." On their knees, as Orthelios and his allies raced to activate the Starforges, they were met with fierce opposition. The Fallen knew what was at stake, and they would stop at nothing to ensure the Starforges remained dormant. Azaziel had already dispatched his most loyal lieutenants to destroy the ancient machines before they could be awakened. The battle for the Starforges was brutal. Orthelios led the charge, his power blazing like a beacon in the darkness as he clashed with the Fallen forces. The ground beneath them trembled with the force of their strikes, and the air itself seemed to burn with the intensity of the battle. "We must hold them off," Orthelios shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos. "The Starforges are our last hope." But as the Fallen pressed in, the situation grew increasingly dire. The Starforges, ancient and colossal, stood just beyond their reach, but it seemed that every step forward was met with insurmountable resistance. Orthelios could feel the weight of the universe pressing down upon him. The fate of all creation seemed to rest on the edge of a blade. "We cannot stop them," Seraphon said, his voice tinged with desperation. "The Fallen are too powerful." Orthelios's eyes hardened with resolve. "We will fight to the end. We have no other choice." Above the battlefield, Azaziel watched with grim satisfaction as his forces began to overwhelm the Prime's defenders. The Starforges were within his grasp. Soon, Terathis would fall, and the universe would bend to his will. But just as victory seemed assured, a ripple of energy surged through the air, a shockwave of power that rattled the very fabric of reality. "What is this?" Azaziel muttered, his eyes narrowing. The Starforges had awakened. Chapter 9. The Awakening of the Stars. The air was thick with the hum of ancient power, a frequency so deep it seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the universe. The ground beneath Terathis trembled, and the stars overhead flickered as though they were alive, reacting to the primal energy now unleashed. Far from the battlefield, deep within the heart of the Starforges, the ancient machines roared to life, their dormant cores stirring after millennia of silence. Orthelios stood at the edge of the Starforge chamber, his heart racing as he watched. The massive structures pulse with power. The vast engines, towering monoliths of twisted metal and starlight, began to glow with an otherworldly radiance. The very atmosphere seemed to shift, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The Fallen, who had been advancing on the Starforges with terrifying precision, paused. The sudden surge of energy rippled through the air like a shockwave, and even Azaziel's forces faltered for a brief moment. "Hold fast," Orthelios shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "The Starforges are awakening. We must ensure they're fully activated." Seraphon's glowing form flickered beside him. "But can they be controlled? These machines, they are older than even the Angelix. We may be unleashing something we cannot contain." Orthelios glanced over at Seraphon, his face hardening. "We have no choice. If we don't activate them, now, Terathis will fall, and with it all hope for the galaxy." Above Terathis, Azaziel stood at the helm of Oblivion's edge, watching the sudden surge of energy from the Starforges with a cold, calculating gaze. The skies above Terathis were ablaze with cosmic fire as the Starforges began to hum with energy, but Azaziel did not waver. He knew exactly what this meant. "Tyrael," Azaziel said, his voice dripping with disdain. "The Prime think they can turn the tide with these ancient machines. They are mistaken. The Starforges are weapons of creation and destruction, but they are beyond their control." Tyrael, ever vigilant, watched the unfolding spectacle. "They are desperate, Azaziel. The Prime may have unlocked something far greater than they realize. These relics are older than anything we've encountered." Azaziel's lips curled into a dark smile. "And that is exactly why they will fail. These machines are too powerful for them. They will burn themselves out, and when they do, we will be there to claim what is ours." With a snap of his fingers, Azaziel gave the order. The Fallen's forces shifted their tactics, and a series of dreadnoughts and warships began to break off from the main fleet, heading toward the Starforges. They would stop this awakening before it could fully manifest. On the surface of Terathis, Orthelios watched as the energy of the Starforges pulsed ever brighter. The air seemed to shimmer, with the power of untold stars, their light bending and swirling in intricate patterns. The Starforges were alive in ways that the ancient races had never fully understood. "The power is rising," Orthelios murmured, feeling the pull of the machines deep within his soul. "This is more than just a weapon. It is the essence of creation itself." Seraphon stepped forward, his eyes filled with both awe and caution. "Orthelios, the Fallen are closing in. We cannot afford to be caught off guard. They are coming for the Starforges." "We will hold them off," Orthelios replied, his voice firm. "We must activate them fully. The fate of the galaxy depends on it." Above in the void, Azaziel's fleet descended upon the Starforges like a swarm of locusts, their weapons primed to strike. The flagship, Oblivion's Edge, led the charge, its dark silhouette looming over the battlefield. The Fallen had come to silence the last hope of the Prime. Azaziel's gaze never left the surface of Terathis. "Prepare for the final assault. We will crush the Starforges and any who stand in our way." Tyrael stood at his side, watching the energy fluctuating from the Starforges. "They are on the verge of full activation, Azaziel. If we do not strike Now they will have unimaginable power at their command. Azaziel nodded, his eyes gleaming with cold fire. Then we will strike with everything we have. On the battlefield, the Prime's forces fought with a fury born of desperation. The key streets of Tarathis were filled with the sounds of battle, clashing swords, energy blasts, and the thunderous roar of war machines. The fallen were relentless, their armies sweeping across the world like a tide of darkness, but the defenders of Tarathis were holding their ground. Orthelios stood in the midst of the chaos, his arms raised, channeling the power of the Starforges into his being. The ground beneath him trembled and the air crackled with raw energy. The Starforges were awakening, and with them the potential to reshape the entire universe. "We are close," Orthelios muttered, sweat beading on his brow. "We need more time, just a little longer." But even as he spoke, the fallen forces surged forward, their weapons blazing. Azaziel's dreadnoughts fired in unison, their beams of destruction slicing through the sky, crashing into the defenses. Around the Starforges, one of the massive dreadnoughts locked its sights on Orthelios's position. A massive beam of energy shot toward him. But just as it was about to strike, a shield of radiant light erupted around him, a protective barrier formed by the energy of the Starforges. The blast struck the shield and was deflected, but the force of the impact sent Orthelios flying backward, his body crashing into the ground. "Orthelios," Seraphon called out, rushing to his side. Orthelios groaned, slowly pushing himself up. His vision blurred for a moment, but he could still feel the Starforge's power coursing through him, stabilizing his body. He was hurt, but not beaten. "Not yet. We must push forward," Orthelios said, his voice rasping. "The Starforges are almost fully awakened. Once they are, we will have the power to push back the fallen." Above the battlefield, Azaziel's eyes narrowed as he watched the Prime struggle to activate the machines. The Starforges were close, too close to full activation. He would not allow this to happen. "Tyrael," Azaziel said, his voice cold and commanding. "It is time. I will personally end this." Tyrael gave a curt nod. "As you wish, Azaziel. The fallen shall not fail." Azaziel's wings unfurled, black and powerful, and with a single flap he shot down toward the surface of Tarathis, his form a blur of darkness against the backdrop of the glowing Starforges. He would end this. He would stop the Prime's last hope from ever coming to fruition. On the ground, Orthelios's heart pounded as he watched Azaziel descend toward them. His power was immense, and Orthelios knew that facing him would be a fight like none other. The time for subtlety was over. If he was going to have any chance of surviving this battle, he would need to fully embrace the power of the Starforges. He turned to Seraphon, his eyes determined. "This is it. We either succeed now or we lose everything." The starlight that surrounded Seraphon flared brightly as he nodded. "Then we stand together, for the universe." Azaziel landed with a thunderous crash, the force of his arrival, shaking the ground beneath them. His wings folded back and his eyes locked onto Orthelios, glowing with an unnatural fire. "You've made a grave mistake, Orthelios," he said, his voice low and filled with venom. "You should have never awakened the Starforges. Now you will die for your foolishness." Orthelios raised his hand, the energy of the Starforges swirling around him. "I will not let you destroy everything we fought for, Azaziel." And with that, the final battle began. Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. The air around the Starforges was thick with energy, charged with the raw, primordial power of creation itself. The ground trembled beneath the forces of light and shadow, and the sky above had become a swirling vortex of cosmic fire. The battle had reached its zenith. Orthelios stood at the center of it all, his hands raised, glowing with the energy of the Starforges, while Azaziel, the dark warlord of the fallen, hovered above him, wings spread wide, a manifestation of darkness, incarnate. The two forces, one born of light, the other of shadow, now faced each other across the battlefield, with nothing but the fate of the universe hanging in the balance. Azaziel's voice rang out, mocking and cold as he glared at Orthelios. "You think you can stop me with these relics, Orthelios? You are nothing but a puppet, a fool who believes the past can save the future. The Starforges will be your tomb." Orthelios's breath was steady, his body pulsating with the energy of creation, the Starforge's power flowing through him like the blood of the cosmos itself. His eyes blazed with the ancient light that had long been dormant. "You have no understanding of what these machines are, Azaziel," Orthelios said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "The Starforges are not just weapons of destruction, they are the key to maintaining the balance of all things. The destruction you seek will undo everything, and you will be nothing but ash in the wind." Azaziel let out a dark laugh, his eyes glowing like burning coals. "Balance. You speak of balance, but your precious balance has failed. The universe is ripe for rebirth, my rebirth. The old order must be swept away, and the fallen will reign in its place. No power, no force can stand against what is coming." "Then, we shall see," Orthelios said, his voice resolute. He raised both hands high, and the Starforges pulsed with energy. The ground beneath him cracked as raw power erupted from the machines, lighting up the skies with their radiant glow. The Starforges were no longer dormant. They were alive, and with them Orthelios had the power to reshape the universe itself. He felt it surge through him, an overwhelming force, both terrifying and awe-inspiring. For a brief moment he wondered if he was truly worthy of such power. But then the weight of his responsibility set in, and he pushed the doubt aside. With a sudden earth-shaking roar, Orthelios released the energy of the Starforges, sending a beam of pure creation toward Azaziel. The blast was so powerful that it split the sky in two, a wave of pure, untainted light that collided with the darkness of Azaziel's form. Azaziel cried out in fury, his wings flaring as he summoned the dark powers within him. The beam of light slammed into an invisible barrier, a shield of pure shadow crackling with dark energy. The collision of light and dark created a thunderous explosion, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Azaziel gritted his teeth and, with a wave of his hand, summoned a torrent of black fire from the depths of the void. It surged toward Orthelios, a burning storm of dark energy, but Orthelios stood firm, his hands glowing brighter, as he called upon the Starforges once again. The two forces collided. In a blinding explosion, a clash of cosmic forces that shook the very foundations of existence. Seraphon, watching from the edge of the battlefield, could feel the intensity of the clash between Orthelios and Azaziel. His heart ached as he watched his friend and leader battle the fallen warlord, knowing that the fate of all creation hung in the balance. But even as the battle raged, Seraphon understood the deeper stakes. This was not just a fight for Terathis or even the Prime. It was a battle for the very soul of the universe. Seraphon raised his arms toward the heavens, calling upon the ancient powers of creation. The Starforges had been awakened, but their full power could not be unlocked through sheer force alone. It required balance, harmony between the forces of light and darkness, creation and destruction. He felt the echoes of the old gods, the whispers of those who had shaped the universe urging him forward. He closed his eyes and began to chant an ancient incantation, the words slipping from his lips in a language long forgotten by mortals. The energy around him grew brighter, and the Starforges pulsed with renewed strength, responding to his call. Azaziel, sensing the shift in the battle, narrowed his eyes. "You think your light can save you, Orthelios? You cannot defeat me with these trinkets of creation. I am the darkness that resides within all things. I am the beginning and the end." He surged forward, his dark energy spiraling outward in a wave of destructive force. The ground shattered beneath him as he advanced, tearing through the defenses of the Prime with ruthless precision. Orthelios met him head-on, his body blazing with the radiant energy of the Starforges. The clash was cataclysmic, two cosmic forces, equal in power but opposite in intent, colliding with the fury of the universe itself. Azaziel unleashed another blast of pure void energy, but this time Orthelios was ready. He summoned the power of the Starforges to shield himself, but as the two forces clashed once more, something changed. The Starforges, once a symbol of creation, now began to shift, their energy warping in response to the balance being tipped. The ground shook violently, and the sky above seemed to crack open. The very fabric of reality trembled, as if it were buckling under the weight of the conflict between light and darkness. Orthelios's eyes widened in realization. "No," he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. "The balance. We're losing it?" Seraphon's voice rang out, clear and urgent. "Orthelios, the Starforges are responding to the imbalance. You cannot fight this alone." But it was too late. Azaziel, sensing the weakening of Orthelios's defenses, pressed the attack with relentless fury. His form, dark as the void itself, moved with terrifying speed. Orthelios tried to summon the last of the Starforge's power, but the machines were no longer responding as they should. "Your time is over, Orthelios," Azaziel said, his voice dripping with triumph. He raised his hand, and a sphere of crushing darkness formed, radiating with the destructive power of the void. "The universe will bow before me." But just as Azaziel prepared to deliver the final blow, a brilliant light exploded from the Starforges, engulfing both him and Orthelios in a wave of pure energy. It was not the light of creation or destruction alone. It was the light of balance, a force that existed between the two extremes, a force that could reshape the universe itself. Seraphon, still chanting, felt the power of the Starforges surge once more, this time in perfect harmony. He opened his eyes, and a wave of understanding washed over him. This was not a battle that could be won through force alone. It was a battle for harmony, for the balance that had been disrupted by the ambition of the fallen. The light of the Starforges flared brighter, and in that moment, Orthelios and Azaziel were both caught in the maelstrom of energy. The very fabric of reality bent and twisted, the stars themselves flickering and dimming. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went silent. Chapter 11. The Shifting of Fates. The silence that followed the blinding eruption of light was not peaceful. It was as though the universe itself had held its breath, waiting for something, anything, to shift, to return to equilibrium. Time itself seemed to stand still. The Starforges, once dormant, now hummed with power, their cosmic hum carrying across the shattered landscape of Tarathis. The pulse of creation and destruction had reached its climax, and all that remained was the echo of what had transpired. Orthelios stood at the center of it all, his body trembling from the sheer intensity of the energy that had flooded through him. The light of the Starforges still burned brightly around him, but the world felt different now, darker, but also filled with an unmistakable sense of hope. Beside him, Seraphon stood, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. He had felt the pulse of the Starforges, felt the cosmic forces at play, but even he could not understand the full scope of what had just occurred. "What happened?" Seraphon whispered, his voice a mix of wonder and apprehension. "The Starforges. They've changed. They're alive in a way they never were before." Orthelios took a slow breath, trying to steady himself. His mind still buzzed with the raw power he had channeled, and the sudden awareness that the universe itself had shifted irrevocably. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch the air around him. It seemed more fragile now, as though it could break with a single wrong move. "The balance," Orthelios murmured. "We have changed it." Seraphon looked up at him, confusion flickering in his gaze. "Changed it? For better or worse?" Orthelios could not answer immediately. The truth was, he did not know. The battle between him and Azaziel had not only been a clash of physical might, it had been a battle between the very fabric of creation and destruction. The Starforges, the cosmic engines of the universe, had responded to that conflict by transforming into something neither fully of light nor of shadow. They were now a force that existed in between, an unstable equilibrium that could tip either way, And then, from the depths of the chaos came a voice, an unearthly presence, both malevolent and sorrowful. "Foolish child." Orthelios turned, and there, standing amidst the remnants of the Starforges' burst of energy, was Azaziel. His form was battered, his wings singed and torn, but his eyes still blazed with unholy fire. He was not defeated, though the battle had left him scarred. "You should not have meddled with powers beyond your comprehension, Orthelios," Azaziel spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You are a creature of light, yet you would dare to play with the darkness you so fear." Orthelios's eyes narrowed as he took a step forward. "It is you who doesn't understand, Azaziel. You think you can control creation itself, but the Starforges are not tools of domination. They are the very essence of existence, the balance of creation and destruction." Azaziel's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Balance? You call this balance? What you have unleashed is chaos, a force that can never be tamed. I will show you what true power is." With a wave of his hand, the ground around him cracked open, and from the depths of the void, dark tendrils shot up, wrapping around Azaziel like chains of shadow. He stood there, embracing the darkness as it swirled around him, feeding him strength. "This is the power of the void," he said, his voice now more intense than ever. "And with it I will reshape this universe as I see fit." Seraphon stepped forward, his form shimmering with the light of the Starforges. "No, Azaziel. This power, this chaos, will consume everything if you wield it. You must let go. There is still a chance to fix what you've broken." Azaziel's laugh echoed through the air, cold and menacing. "Fix? There is nothing to fix. It is too late. For that you do not understand. This is the end of your world." Meanwhile, high above Tarathis, the stars flickered uncertainly, as though they too were unsure of what was to come. The galaxy seemed to watch, waiting for the final shift in the cosmic scales. The struggle between the forces of light and darkness had not only devastated a world, it had affected the very fabric of reality itself. But Orthelios could not let Azaziel's madness prevail. The fate of the universe hung on this moment. The balance must be restored. With a fierce determination, Orthelios reached deep within, tapping into the energy of the Starforges. His body crackled with the power of creation as he summoned the forces of light and dark, bringing them together into a singular force of balance. He could feel it. He could feel the entire universe pulling together, the chaotic energies of creation and destruction colliding in a final, cataclysmic storm. "This ends now, Azaziel," Orthelios said, his voice filled with authority. Azaziel's eyes gleamed with defiance. "You are too late." With a burst of energy, Orthelios hurled a beam of pure cosmic energy toward Azaziel. The force was unlike anything the Fallen had ever seen. A surge of creation and destruction merged into one, pure and unrelenting. Azaziel raised his hand to block it, but it was too much. The beam struck him square in the chest, and Azaziel screamed in agony as the light and darkness overwhelmed him. His body was consumed by the energy, his form twisting and warping as the raw force of the Starforges tore at him. It was not just destruction, it was the unmaking of the very essence of his being. For a moment it seemed as though Azaziel would endure it, but then, with a final terrible roar, his body disintegrated into nothingness. The darkness he had tried to wield was swallowed by the light of creation, and all that remained was the echo of his final cry. Orthelios stood, panting heavily, his body still vibrating with the immense energy he had unleashed. Seraphon was by his side, his eyes wide with awe. The Starforges had finally done what they were meant to do. They had restored the balance, but at a great cost. The war was over. Azaziel was gone. But the galaxy had been irrevocably changed. The universe was no longer as it had been. The balance between creation and destruction had shifted, and no one, least of all Orthelios, knew exactly what that would mean. Chapter 12. The final dawn. The universe was still. The aftermath of the final battle stretched across Tarathis, where the remnants of the Starforges flickered dimly, their once vibrant energy now quiet, as though they too had witnessed the fall of Azaziel and the shift in the cosmic scales. The sky was a vast expanse of stars, many of which had been dimmed or extinguished by the tumultuous forces unleashed in the wake of the clash between light and shadow. Yet, in the distance, the first rays of dawn began to break through the infinite expanse of darkness, heralding a new beginning, a new age. Orthelios stood on the shattered surface of the battlefield, his form weary and broken from the battle he had fought. His clothes were torn and his skin burned from the searing energy he had wielded, but his resolve remained unshaken. He gazed out across the horizon, eyes focused on the distant stars, now glowing with an ethereal brilliance. The galaxy, though, scarred, was still alive. Beside him stood Seraphon, the former architect and now guardian of the Starforges. The faint glow of creation still lingered in Seraphon's eyes, a reminder of his crucial role in the balance that had been restored. Together they had shaped the course of the universe, but they both knew that the work was not yet complete. The battle was over, but the consequences of their actions were just beginning to unfold. "We did it," Seraphon said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Orthelios's gaze remained fixed on the stars. "Did we?" His words were barely a whisper, as if he too were questioning the price they had paid to restore the balance. The Starforges are no longer just tools of creation. They are the pulse of the universe, and with their awakening, we have reset the cycle of life and death, Seraphon explained, his tone thoughtful. But that means we've also set in motion a new era. The forces we have unleashed are still growing, still shifting. There is much to learn. Much to fix, Orthelios added, the weight of his own doubts pressing on him. He turned his gaze toward the remnants of Azaziel, now nothing but ash in the wind. Azaziel was consumed by his own ambition. But how long before another rises? To take his place? Seraphon did not answer immediately. He too knew that the peace they had achieved was fragile. The very forces they had tampered with were unpredictable. The universe had been forever changed by the Starforges' awakening, and there were those who would seek to exploit this newfound power. "It is not just about the fallen," Seraphon said finally, his voice filled with the weight of an ancient truth. "The balance we've restored is not the same as it once was. Creation and destruction no longer exist as opposing forces. They are now part of a greater whole, a dynamic that must be maintained, not by power or domination, but by understanding." Orthelios looked at Seraphon, his expression one of contemplation. "And how do we maintain it?" "We don't," Seraphon said simply. "Not alone. The universe must find its own path forward. We are merely its guides, its stewards. The Starforges are no longer simply our tools. They are the key to the future. But they are not meant to be controlled. They must be understood." The air around them seemed to stir, as though the universe itself were responding to Seraphon's words. The stars above began to pulse with renewed vigor, their light brighter than before, their energy now tempered by the balance they had fought so hard to restore. In the distance, the surviving factions of the Angelix, those who had not been consumed by the conflict, began to stir. The great celestial cities, once teetering on the edge of destruction, now seemed to breathe once more. The war between the Angelix and the Fallen was over, but the galaxy would need to rebuild. The celestial architects, long silent, began to return to their posts, guiding the stars and shaping the flow of time once again. But the galaxy was not the same as it had been before. The Starforges had rewritten the rules of existence, and even those who had once been the most powerful beings in the cosmos felt the weight of the change. The battle for balance had not only been fought in the hearts of the gods and the fallen, it had been fought in the very fabric of reality. Now, with the dust settling and the cosmos realigning, a new chapter would begin. Back on Tarathis, Orthelios and Seraphon stood in the quiet aftermath, their thoughts still tangled in the complexity of what had happened. For a moment, they simply watched the new dawn unfold before them, Then, Orthelios spoke, his voice quieter, now as if reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "I was once so sure of my purpose," he said, his tone heavy with the burden of the choices he had made. "But now, I don't know. We've won, but at what cost?" Seraphon turned to him, a calm understanding in his eyes. "We cannot see the future, Orthelios, but we can guide it. The balance has shifted. What happens next is up to all of us. What we've learned from this war, the price we've paid, will shape the next age." Orthelios nodded, his gaze distant. "And what of the fallen?" "They will rise again," Seraphon replied, "but they are not the same as they were. The cycle of life and death cannot be halted, and there will always be those who seek to impose their will upon the universe. But as long as the Starforges stand, there is hope." Orthelios sighed deeply, a quiet sadness in his heart. Hope? Yes. But is hope enough? Far above, the Starforges still pulsed, their light now steady, though no longer blinding. The echoes of creation and destruction could be felt across the galaxy, and the silent understanding between Orthelios and Seraphon was shared by every star in the heavens. The universe was forever changed. It had been saved, but at the cost of a sacrifice that could never be undone. The war between light and dark had shaped the fate of all things, and now the delicate balance between the two had entered a new phase. For the first time in an eternity, Orthelios felt the weight of the universe not as a burden, but as a responsibility. The future was unwritten, but it was theirs to guide. And as the light of the first dawn touched the remnants of Tarathis, Orthelios knew one thing for certain: the work was far from over. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning of a new cycle, one that would stretch across the stars, forever defining the legacy of the Angelix and the fallen. Epilogue. The everlasting echo. The war had ended, the stars had settled, and the universe, though scarred, had found its rhythm once more. The great struggle between the Angelix and the fallen had torn through the fabric of creation, yet from the ashes, a new order had risen. Orthelios stood at the heart of the cosmos, his gaze drifting across the vast expanse of space, a silent observer to the ebb and flow of life he and his kind had brought into existence. Time had passed since the final clash between the forces of light and shadow, since Azaziel's fall, and the shattering of the Starforges. The worlds that had once teetered on the brink of destruction now flourished with life, flora and fauna thriving on planets once barren, stars flickering in harmonious constellations, and the very fabric of existence pulsing with a vibrant energy. But even as the scars of war healed, the echoes of the past lingered. The Angelix, now fewer in number but greater in wisdom, had returned to their sacred citadels, their celestial sanctuaries, to rebuild and reflect. The Starforges, now sentient, no longer simply served as tools of creation. They had become protectors of the balance, ever vigilant in their task to ensure that neither creation nor destruction would again grow too powerful. Yet, as the Starforges whispered to one another in their quiet cosmic language, Orthelios knew the truth. The universe was not static. It was alive, forever shifting, evolving, and inevitably testing the fragile equilibrium they had fought so hard to preserve. Orthelios could feel it deep within him, the yearning, the restless stirring that had once consumed Azaziel, the desire to control, to bend the cosmos to one's will. The fallen may have been defeated, but the darkness of their ambition had not been completely eradicated. It was woven into the fabric of existence itself, a seed buried deep in the hearts of all, creation that would never truly fade. Balance. The word echoed through his mind, both a reminder and a warning. Creation could not exist without destruction, and light could not be understood without darkness. The balance was delicate, fragile, but it was what made the universe whole. He had learned that much through the battle, and even now, as peace settled like a blanket over the galaxy, he knew the fight was never truly over. The eternal dance between the forces of creation and destruction would continue, long after he was gone. But for now, Orthelios allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He looked toward the horizon of the galaxy, toward the stars that continued to burn bright, each one a story of life, struggle, and growth. As the Angelix had once shaped the cosmos, so too would life continue to shape itself. The Starforges, guardians of the balance, would continue their task, and new life would spread across the universe, following the delicate order the Angelix had instilled. The future remained unwritten, a vast canvas waiting for the brushstrokes of fate. As Orthelios stood at the edge of time, feeling the pulse of creation beneath his feet, he realized that though his journey had ended, the journey of the universe was eternal. It would continue, forever shifting, forever changing, but always bound by the law of balance. The Angelix had created the stars. The fallen had sought to destroy them. But in the end, it was the balance between light and dark, creation and destruction, that would hold the universe together. And so, the first race, the Angelix, had played their part. Now, the story of the cosmos was in the hands of those who would follow. New races would rise, new gods would be born, and the eternal struggle would live on, echoing through the ages. For creation is never finished. The cycle is endless, and somewhere, far in the depths of space, the stars whispered of the next beginning, the end, or perhaps the beginning. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.